You are 19 years old when the university closes its doors on you, and until then the most dangerous thing in your life is the winter surf off the Pine Beach at Senbon. You grow up in Numazu, where your father, Tatsuo Sawada, repairs clocks and watches in a shop 2 streets from the station, and your mother, Kiku, sells pickles from a stall by the market gate. Your younger sister, Sachiko, is 14 and believes a uniform is the only clothing that means anything. Your closest friend, Goro Mikami, works at a bicycle repair stand and spends most of his wages on cigarettes and sumo bets. Haruka Tsujimura, the daughter of a school teacher, has known you since you were both too small to reach the shop counter, and she is the only person alive who can make you stop talking when you are nervous. You expect to sit at your father's bench, learn escapements and mainsprings, save for 2 rooms above a shop, marry Haruka, and complain about the price of charcoal until you are old. Then, on the 21st of October, 1943, the government ends the deferment that kept students out of the army. In Tokyo, tens of thousands of students march in the rain at Meiji Shrine Outer Garden, while crowds watch and a band plays. You hear it on the radio, in your father's shop, surrounded by 40 clocks, none of them agreeing. Your father does not cheer. He served in Siberia after the last war, and 2 fingers on his left hand end early, because of the cold. When you ask whether Japan can still win, he turns a mainspring over in the light. Anything can be wound, he says. Not everything can hold. Your papers arrive in the spring. Before you leave, Sachiko gives you a 1,000-stitch belt. She stood outside the market for 9 days asking women to add 1 red knot each. She did not get 1,000. She finished the rest herself. At night. Badly. The knots are on the outside and the belt is too short for your waist. She says it will stop bullets. You tell her it can start by stopping the wind. She makes you wear it anyway. You are sent to an army flying school. You expect the sky. You get mathematics, a wooden rifle, and slapping. Discipline is delivered by hand across the face, in rows, for mistakes, and sometimes for the weather. You learn navigation, engine theory, and the Type 95 trainer, a fabric biplane that men call the Red Dragonfly. Fuel is short. Aircraft are short. Instructors are shorter. By 1944, the average Japanese pilot reaches the front with a fraction of the flight hours an American pilot receives, and the number keeps falling. Because your hands know small mechanisms, you are put to work on instruments between flights. Altimeters, compasses, tachometers that lie. You get very good at knowing when a gauge is telling a story. Goro somehow arrives at the same school 6 weeks later. He says this proves the Empire keeps terrible records. Sergeant Major Ryoichi Oba disagrees. Oba is 33, from Niigata, a professional airman who flew over China and came back with a limp and no opinions about glory. He has the flat patience of a man who has watched boys confuse enthusiasm for skill. He teaches you 3 rules. Keep your compass honest. Never trust a fuel gauge you have not tapped twice. And when Goro has an idea, wait until it lands before you agree with it. In October 1944, the war changes shape. American forces land in the Philippines. On the 25th, off Leyte, a formation of bomb-carrying Navy fighters flies deliberately into the American fleet. The escort carrier St. Lo burns and sinks. The word appears in newspapers as if it had always existed. Special attack. Divine wind. At the school, an officer reads the report aloud. Boys cheer. Oba looks at the hangar roof. You wait for someone to explain that this was an emergency measure. Nobody does. Instead, forms arrive. They are simple. Volunteer eagerly. Volunteer. Do not volunteer. Your name is already printed at the top. You are told to answer honestly, in a room, while your commander watches, beside men you have eaten and bled and been beaten with for a year. Almost every hand goes up. Yours goes up. You will spend the rest of your life trying to explain what that word volunteer meant inside that room, and you will never find a sentence short enough. Then the lieutenant gives you a task. There is a trainee named Hisao Kanda who left the form blank. Kanda is 17. He has 40 hours in the air and a mother in Toyama. Talk to him, the lieutenant says. He respects you. You sit with him behind the fuel drums for an hour. You use the words everybody is using that winter. The country. The next generation. Your mother's street. His hand shakes when he signs. Oba finds you afterwards. He does not shout. He says only that some orders cost the man who carries them more than the man who receives them, and that you should remember the difference. You do not understand him yet. In 40 years you will understand him completely. In February 1945, your unit moves south to a grass airfield in Kagoshima, at the very bottom of Japan. There are pines along the edge, and a mountain behind it, and cherry trees that are about to be a problem for you for the rest of your life. The aircraft waiting for you are not new. Some are trainers, some are fighters older than the war. A bomb is bolted underneath, wired so it cannot be released. The plane is now a fuse with a boy inside it. American ships are 800 kilometers away, screening the invasion of Okinawa. On the 6th of April, the first mass operation begins. Hundreds of aircraft go out in a single day, wave after wave, under an operational name that means floating chrysanthemums. 9 more waves follow through June. The evening before a sortie, there is a ceremony. White headband, a cup of sake, poured by an officer with a steady hand. You write your final letter, and enclose clippings of hair and fingernails, because there will be nothing else to send home. You tell your parents you are grateful. You tell Sachiko the belt has already survived rain, oil, and 1 very aggressive dog. You write to Haruka, and cross out 4 beginnings. In the morning, schoolgirls from the local high school line the strip and wave branches of cherry blossom as the engines run up. They are 15 years old. They are still doing this in their 90s, in their sleep. 9 men take off that first week from your side of the field. None of them are on the radio for long. The Americans have radar picket destroyers, standing patrols of fighters, and shells that explode near an aircraft without needing to touch it. Later, historians will estimate that fewer than 1 in 6 special attack aircraft ever reached a ship. The pilots are told they are worth an aircraft carrier each. Your name is on the list for the 12th. You get to 800 meters over the sea when the engine begins to surge. You tap the gauge twice. It is not the gauge. You watch the cylinder head temperature climb, and you make the calculation that Oba drilled into you 100 times, and then you understand what the calculation means today, and you turn back anyway. You land. The ground crew says nothing. That is the worst part. There is a barracks for men like you, men whose engines failed, whose escorts turned back, whose targets were not found in 10 tenths cloud. Officially you await a new aircraft. Unofficially you are a ghost, who has attended his own funeral and then walked back into the room. Some men fly and return 4 times. 1 man in the war reportedly returned 9. Goro goes out on the 16th. His flight is intercepted 40 minutes from the target. He puts the aircraft into the sea, burning, and a fishing boat pulls him out near Tanegashima, with most of the skin gone from his left arm. You are told he is alive by an orderly who says it the way you say something embarrassing. The next week, aircraft are so scarce that men are assigned to fly in whatever the depots can push out of the shed. Some Navy pilots fly a rocket-powered plywood machine slung under a bomber, a thing the Americans nickname the fool bomb, and the bombers are usually shot down before they can release it. At night, in the barracks, Hisao Kanda cannot sleep, so he talks. He asks whether anyone will remember them properly. Not the newspapers. Properly. You have no answer, so you make one up. He says that if he does not come back, he will return as a firefly, and you are not to shoo it out of the house. He takes off on a clear morning in May. The mountain is green. The engine sounds perfect. Oba is put on the list in June. He is 33, an instructor, and there is no military reason for it beyond the fact that there is nothing left to instruct with. Before he walks out, he hands you his flying gloves and tells you the ground crew are short. He tells you to keep the compasses honest. He takes off at 0540. There is no confirmation of anything. After the war, you will read every list you can reach. Repatriation records, prison camp registers, unit rolls that burned and were reassembled from memory. You will find 3 men named Ryoichi Oba. None of them can be proved to be yours. You will write his name inside the cover of your logbook and put a small mark beside it, and the mark will be a question. Your own second sortie is scheduled for the middle of August. On the 15th, you are told to assemble by the radio. The voice is thin and formal, and uses court language most of the men have never heard spoken aloud. Some officers understand immediately. Some do not. A mechanic asks whether that means they won. It does not. An officer draws his pistol and is talked out of it. Another burns papers in a drum for 2 hours. Somewhere in Tokyo, the admiral who created the Special Attack Corps takes his own life the following night, and leaves an apology to the pilots he sent. On the coast, a vice admiral leads a final flight out to sea after the surrender, taking men with him. Nobody at your field can find anyone who will give an order about breakfast. You stand on the grass beside an aircraft loaded with a bomb that will never be dropped, and you realize you have been dead for 4 months and are now expected to be 21. The train home takes 3 days. The country outside the window is not the country in the newsreels. Whole districts of cities are flat, grey, and geometric, like something erased carefully. Numazu burned in July, almost all of it. Your father's shop is a rectangle of ash with a scorched safe in the middle. Your family is alive in a shelter dug behind a neighbor's storehouse. Your mother nearly knocks you down. Sachiko is 16. She looks at your uniform, then your face, then your waist. The belt is still there. Only then does she cry. Your father takes you to the garden and digs up a soy sauce barrel. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, are his tools. All of them. Tweezers, files, loops, the small brass movements he was mending in June. Haruka is working at a clinic. When you see her, you expect 4 years to fall away. They do not. You have changed. So has she. She takes the second step, though, and that turns out to be the whole answer. Post-war Japan is not peace in the simple way you imagined it. It is queues, black markets, occupation soldiers, and a currency that means less every month. It is also silence. The men who died are heroes in some houses, and a national embarrassment in others, and nobody agrees which, and so people simply stop saying the word. You do not talk about the airfield. When a foreman asks what you did in the war, you say you worked on instruments. That is true. It is also cowardice, and you know the difference. Once, on a bus in 1948, a woman hears where you were stationed and asks why you are still alive. You have no answer for her either. You get off 2 stops early and walk. Goro reappears in 1949 with a cane, a rebuilt arm, and the same face. He looks at your father's new shop, one bench under a tin roof, and says that he leaves you alone for a single summer, and you become a hero nobody is allowed to mention. You laugh far harder than the joke deserves. You marry Haruka that autumn. At the reception, Goro claims he personally kept you alive. Sachiko interrupts and says the belt deserves the credit. Your father reopens the shop properly in 1951. There are few parts and endless broken machines, station clocks, factory timers, wristwatches soldiers traded for rice. Your hands remember everything, and that frightens you at first, because you learned in Kagoshima how quickly a man can become an efficient part of something monstrous. Repair becomes the way you argue with that. By the numbers, the special attack campaign kills more than 7,000 Allied sailors, sinks several dozen ships, and damages hundreds more. It does not stop the invasion of Okinawa. It does not delay the end of the war. Roughly 3,000 to 4,000 young men die carrying it out. Almost none of them are older than you were. When your children are old enough, you do not give them the newsreel version. You tell them you raised your hand in that room. You tell them you cheered when the carrier sank. You tell them about the form with your name already printed on it. You tell them about the barracks for men who came back. You tell them about a 17-year-old whose hand shook while he signed, and about who was sitting next to him, talking. Eventually your son asks whether you were brave. You think about the temperature gauge climbing, the schoolgirls with the cherry branches, Goro burning on the water, Orba's gloves, 3 names on a list and none of them provable. I tried to be worth the years I did not earn, you tell him. He asks if you were. You look at the bench, 40 movements, all ticking, none of them agreeing. I am still checking, you say. One night in your 50s, a firefly comes into the kitchen through the screen. Haruka reaches for the door. You ask her to leave it open instead, and you sit there until it goes out on its own, and you do not explain, and she does not ask. Years later, after Sachiko dies, her daughter brings you a wooden box found among her things. Inside is another 1,000-stitch belt, finished. A full 1,000 knots even, tight, the work of decades of small evenings. Beneath it, a note, for when the first one wears out. You laugh until you cannot. You sit at your father's bench. He taught you that when a clock stops, a repairer should never begin by blaming the last part he touched. Open it. Listen. The mechanism will show you where it failed, and the answer is almost never one broken piece. It is dust and small wear and years of nobody looking. For the rest of your life, people will ask when Japan broke. Manchuria in 1931, China in 1937, Pearl Harbor, Midway, Leyte. The morning someone decided a 19-year-old and his aircraft were the same object. The room with the printed forms. The day the radio spoke in a language nobody used. Eventually you understand there was never one sound. Countries stop the way clocks stop. Ambition, obedience, fear, flattery, silence, and thousands of people agreeing not to hear the noise. And they are started again the same way. Not by pretending the mechanism was always clean. By opening it, and looking, and saying exactly what you find. You tie Sachiko's new belt around your waist. This one fits. Outside, the shop clock strikes the hour. You listen until the ticking settles. For once, it is not counting down to anything. It is just telling you what time it is.